Hello, my dear students. As you all are aware that we are discussing about the Standing Orders Act, Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. And in this chain, we have already studied about the concept and nature of the industrial employment in Standing Orders Act 1946 that we have already covered in our previous lecture. Today, we'll talk about the scope and coverage of this act. Establishments which are covered under this act, the act applies to every industrial establishment wherein 100 or more workmen are employed or were employed on any day of preceding 12 months, and the appropriate government can include other establishments also. So this act, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act, will be applying to all the industrial or every industrial establishment wherein 100 or more workmen are employed or they were employed in preceding 12 months. And apart from these establishments, if the appropriate government feels that there are certain other establishments on which this act should apply, so appropriate government can do so. Industrial establishment under section 2E defined under the act, which mean an industrial establishment as defined in clause 2nd of section 2 of the Payment of Wages Act, which define industrial establishment to mean any tramway or motor transport service engaged in carrying passenger, goods, or both by road or hire or reward. Air transport service other than such service belonging to or exclusively employed in the military, naval, or air forces of the Union or civil aviation under the Government of India. Dock, wharf, or jetty, inland vessel, mechanically propelled, all those things would be falling under industrial establishment. Mine, quarry, or oil field, plantations, workshops, or other establishments in which articles are produced, adopted, or manufactured with a view to their use, to transport and sales. So all those things would be treated as establishments. There are certain other establishments which would be covered for the purpose of this act, in which any work relating to construction development or maintenance of buildings, roads, bridges, or canals, or relating to operations connected with navigation, irrigation, or the supply of water, or relating to the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity, or any other form of power which is being carried on. So establishment in which any work which is related to the construction development or maintenance of buildings, or it might be related to the roads, bridges, or canals, or relating to operations connected with the navigations, irrigation related, or the supply of water, or relating to the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity, or other form of power which is being carried on, will fall uh, under the act as industrial establishment. And industrial and any other establishment as mentioned under section 2 clause 2nd of Payment of Wages Act 1936 as defined in clause 2nd of the section 2 of the Payment of Wages Act 1963, or a factory as defined in clause M of section 2 of the Factories Act 1948. As Factory Act section 2M talks about the factories that where with the aid of power 10 or more people were are employed or working or were working in the preceding 12 months, and in case of if there are 20 in case of 20 workers, they are working without the aid of power for the purpose of the Factories Act, would be treated as a factory. So these establishment would also fall under this category for the purpose of this Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act. Our railway as defined in clause 4 of section 2 of the Indian Railways Act 1890, or the establishment of a person who for the purpose of fulfilling a contract with the owner of any industrial establishment employs workmen. I repeat this: the establishment of a person who for the purpose of fulfilling a contract with the owner of any industrial establishment employs workmen. And of course, under this Industrial Establishment Standing Orders Act 1946, certain establishments are excluded and the act is not applicable to those establishments. Any industry, what are those? Any industry to which the provisions of Chapter 7, I repeat, any industry to which the provisions of Chapter 7th of the Bombay Industrial Relations Act 1946 apply. So this establishment would be excluded, and the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act will not be applicable to those establishments where this Bombay Industrial Relations Act 1946 Chapter 7 is applicable or applies. And certain other establishments are also excluded for the purpose of the Industrial Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act. Any industrial establishment to which the provisions of the Madhya Pradesh Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act apply. My dear students, I repeat that there are certain establishments which would be excluded, and the employment, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act will not apply to those establishments. Number one, I have already told you in the industry where the Chapter 7 of the Bombay Industrial Relations Act applies, 1946 apply. Chapter 7, whatever the provisions we are having for the Bombay Industrial Relations Act, and an industrial establishment to which the provisions of Madhya Pradesh Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act apply, provided that notwithstanding anything contained in the Madhya Pradesh Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1961, the provisions of this act shall apply to all industrial establishments under the control of central government, right? And other exempted establishments are this act. We are talking about the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. This act shall not apply to any industrial establishment insofar as the workmen employed therein are persons to whom the fundamental and supplementary rules, civil services, classification, control, appeal, which is related to the civil services, or the rules or the civil services which also include the temporary services, rules, revised leave rules, civil services regulations. So all those would be exempted. Civilians in defense services, classification, control, and appeal rules. All these civilians in the defense services and Indian Railways establishments code or any other rules or regulations that may be notified in this behalf by the appropriate government in the official gazette apply. So these industrial railway establishment will also be excluded as mentioned, as discussed, right? Uh, Regulations that may be notified in this behalf by the appropriate government in the official gazette apply. So this is all, my dear students, that what industrial establishments would be exempted, and what is the scope and coverage of that the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act. So I hope that you will consult these PPTs, and you will just go through the BEAR Act also, and then you will be easily comprehending that what is the scope and coverage of the Employment Standing Orders Act. I believe, I hope that this lecture will definitely help you to understand the coverage and scope. And in our next lecture, we will pick up some new topic associated to the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. Thank you so much, my dear students, for your patience listening, and take care.